Trust is perhaps one of the most powerful illusions we have built throughout our evolution as a species. We think of it as something solid, almost tangible, an invisible bridge between two human beings. But what do we really know about that bridge? Who can we truly trust in this increasingly complex world where human relationships are simultaneously more superficial and more intertwined than ever before? For thousands of years, our ancestors lived in small groups where trust was a matter of immediate survival. You had to know with absolute certainty that the hunter beside you wouldn't abandon you when a predator appeared. This trust was an evolutionary protection mechanism, essential and necessary, but now we live in a radically different world, where threats and alliances take on much subtler and more complex forms. Technology has completely transformed our capacity to trust and to be trustworthy. We no longer trust only people, but systems, algorithms, and entire networks of interconnected humans and machines. Have you ever wondered why we feel that almost painful need to trust someone? That deep sense that we need at least one person in the world who completely understands who we are, who stands by us unconditionally? That desire isn't accidental. It's the echo of our evolution as a social species, when isolation meant certain death. But the world has changed drastically, and our evolutionary instincts are not always aligned with the realities of modern life. Today, trust has become simultaneously more necessary and more dangerous than it has ever been. Let's examine the origins of this contradiction. For most of human history, we lived in groups of 50 to 150 people. We knew every member of our tribe intimately, their facial expressions, habits, strengths, and weaknesses. Trust was based on direct, constant observation, reinforced by blood ties and decades of shared experience. In hunter-gatherer societies, betraying the group's trust often resulted in exile, practically a death sentence. In that context, it was relatively safe to trust your immediate circle. Evolution equipped us with sophisticated neurological mechanisms to detect lies and assess reliability. Our brains have circuits dedicated to recognizing micro-expressions and subtle inconsistencies in others' behavior. But these mechanisms were designed for a world very different from the one we live in today. In the information age, our evolutionary tools for assessing trust face unprecedented challenges. We regularly interact with thousands of people we will never meet in person. We trust companies, governments, and systems made up of millions of anonymous individuals. Our ability to assess who deserves trust is overloaded beyond the limits it was designed for. And so we come to a disturbing conclusion. There are entire categories of people whom our natural tendency is to trust, but who often don't deserve that trust. Not because they're inherently malevolent, but because the incentives, structures, and realities of the modern world create conditions where implicit trust becomes dangerous. Who are these people we shouldn't trust blindly, even when all our instincts and social conditioning tell us otherwise? Before identifying them, it's important to understand that this isn't a call for universal paranoia. I'm not advocating for a world where we suspect every smile, every offer of help, every extended hand. That would be not only psychologically destructive, but also evolutionarily counterproductive. Cooperation based on trust is what allowed us to build civilizations. But we must recognize that our programming to trust doesn't always serve our best interests in the radically transformed environment we've created. The first category of people we must question are those whose incentives are fundamentally misaligned with our interests, even when they are members of our own family. Consider the financial advisor who also happens to be your cousin. He may genuinely care about you and your family. He may sit at your dinner table during holidays and share childhood stories. But if he earns commissions from the financial products he sells, his incentives are not fully aligned with your best interests. Not because he's ill-intentioned, but because the economic systems we operate in create these inherent contradictions. The structure of the modern financial system makes it nearly impossible for him to offer completely impartial advice, even with the best intentions. He is trapped in a system that rewards certain recommendations over others, regardless of what would actually be best for you. This is a new reality our hunter-gatherer ancestors never had to face. They never had to consider how an invisible incentive system could influence the behavior of tribe members. When a clan member offered advice about where to hunt, that advice was based purely on the shared success of the hunt. Today, invisible structures of incentives permeate all our social interactions in ways we rarely fully understand. The second category is even more complicated. Those who sincerely believe they are acting in our best interest, but whose fundamental beliefs about what constitutes best interest diverge deeply from ours. Think of well-meaning parents who pressure their children to pursue careers they themselves value, but that may not align with their children's passions or talents. They are not trying to cause harm. In fact, they're convinced they're protecting their children from future suffering. But their definition of what makes a good or successful life may be fundamentally incompatible with their child's. Implicit trust in their judgment can lead to years of unhappiness, distorted life choices, and wasted potential. This problem has always existed to some extent. Even in hunter-gatherer societies, there was tension between individual needs and group expectations. But the complexity and diversity of the modern world have dramatically widened that gap. Today, the possibilities for living a meaningful life are so vast and varied that one generation's assumptions about what constitutes a good life can be radically different from the next. And yet, we instinctively trust those closest to us to guide us through these monumental decisions, often without critically examining whether their mental models of the world are still relevant to the realities we face. The third category we must approach with caution are those who operate with significantly outdated or incomplete information, even when they have the best intentions. Consider the family doctor you've known for decades. You trust him implicitly, but if he doesn't stay up to date with the latest medical research, if he isn't familiar with the newest treatments, your trust may be misplaced. Not because he wishes you harm, but because human knowledge is expanding at a rate that makes it impossible for any individual to stay completely current, even within their own specialty. This is an entirely new vulnerability in human history. For tens of thousands of years, the body of knowledge necessary for survival changed relatively little from generation to generation. An elder's advice on how to hunt, find medicinal plants, or build shelter remained valid for centuries. Today, medical knowledge doubles approximately every 73 days. Studies that inform best practices in virtually every field are constantly being updated, revised, and sometimes completely overturned. In this environment, trust based on familiarity or past experience can be dangerously outdated. The fourth category includes those who are themselves victims of belief systems or institutions that distort their judgment, even if they are personally virtuous. Consider the pastor or religious leader you've known since childhood. He may be genuinely devoted to your well-being and deeply committed to his principles. But if he operates within a belief system that prioritizes certain values or behaviors over your psychological well-being or personal autonomy, his guidance can be harmful regardless of his intentions. He is not hypocritical or malicious. He truly believes he's offering you the most valuable advice possible. But he's trapped within a framework of thought that may, in some cases, value conformity over individual well-being. This, too, is something our ancestors rarely faced on such a scale. In the small, homogeneous communities of the past, beliefs and values were generally shared across the entire group. There was no need to navigate radically different value systems or consider how institutional biases could distort the advice one received. Today, we are constantly crossing boundaries between different value systems, often without realizing it. The fifth category includes those who simply lack the capacity to be trustworthy in the specific area where we are placing our trust, regardless of their personal qualities. Consider the longtime friend who offers business advice despite never having run a company, or the brother who gives relationship advice despite his own record of dysfunctional partnerships. They may genuinely want to help. They may even sincerely believe they have valuable insights to offer. But without relevant experience or expertise, their guidance is more likely to be harmful than helpful, no matter how good their intentions. Again, this is a relatively new complexity. In smaller, simpler societies, it was much easier to assess someone's competence. You could directly see whether a hunter consistently brought back food or whether a shelter builder constructed huts that stayed standing through storms. Today, we assess competence in fields so specialized and esoteric that it's almost impossible for a layperson to distinguish between advice that is sound and advice that only sounds plausible but is fundamentally wrong. The sixth and final category we must question are those who may not be fully aware of their own biases, prejudices, and blind spots, even while sincerely trying to help us. Consider a mentor who built his career in an era with very different power dynamics and social expectations. He may genuinely want to guide you towards success, but his understanding of what constitutes appropriate behavior or effective strategies may be fundamentally misaligned with today's realities. Not because he's deliberately outdated, but because we are all deeply shaped by our formative experiences, often in ways we don't fully realize. This challenge has always existed to some degree, but the acceleration of social and technological change has made it far more pronounced. Our grandparents grew up in a world where certain assumptions about race, gender, sexuality, and ability were rarely questioned. They may have internalized perspectives that we now recognize as harmful, not out of malice, but simply as a product of their time and environment. Their guidance may inadvertently perpetuate systems of inequality or exclusion that they themselves do not fully recognize. I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this discussion about trust resonates most with your own experiences? Have you ever found yourself trusting someone close to you, only to later realize that despite their best intentions, the trust may have been misplaced? I know that we often keep such realizations to ourselves, perhaps out of fear of appearing ungrateful or cynical in a world that celebrates unconditional trust as a virtue. But your experiences are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. I learned to question trust when. Your honesty can help create a space where we can discuss these complexities more openly instead of pretending that trust is always simple and unequivocal. And perhaps by sharing these experiences, we can develop a more nuanced and adaptive approach to deciding whom to trust and under what circumstances. Now, let us explore the broader implications of these considerations. What does it mean to live in a world where implicit trust is no longer adaptive? How do we navigate the complexities of human relationships when the very systems that structure those relationships often create incentives for betrayal, even if subtle or unintentional? First, we must recognize that this is not an argument for universal cynicism. Trusting selectively and strategically is not the same as not trusting. In fact, research consistently shows that societies with high levels of social trust perform better across almost every indicator, from economic prosperity to self-reported happiness. The goal is not to eliminate trust, but to refine it, to make it more robust and adapted to the complexities of the modern world. A crucial step is to separate trust in people from trust in systems, incentives, and circumstances. We can fully trust someone's moral character while simultaneously recognizing that the systems in which they operate may compromise their ability to act according to their best intentions. This distinction is essential for maintaining healthy relationships while protecting ourselves from unintended harm. Consider how this perspective changes family dynamics. Instead of assuming that a close relative will always give the best advice simply because they share your genetic code and genuine affection, we can separately evaluate their knowledge, experience, and the incentive structures in which they operate. This does not mean treating family members with suspicion. It means recognizing that genuine love does not automatically grant expertise in every area, nor does it override systemic pressures that may distort judgment. This approach also has profound implications for how we educate the next generation. Traditionally, we have taught children to trust certain authority figures implicitly: parents, teachers, police officers, doctors. But perhaps a more sophisticated approach is needed in an increasingly complex world. What if, instead of teaching categorical trust, we taught discernment? What if we equipped children with tools to evaluate whom to trust, when, and in which specific domains? This does not mean raising a generation of cynics, but rather a generation of critical thinkers capable of navigating a world where misplaced trust can have significant consequences. It means teaching them to differentiate between a person's moral character and their competence in specific areas. It means helping them understand how systems and incentives shape behavior, sometimes even overriding the best of intentions. There are also fascinating implications for the development of emerging technologies, particularly artificial intelligence and automated systems. As we increasingly delegate decisions to algorithms, whom are we really trusting? The programmers who wrote the original code? The companies that own and operate the systems? The statistical models and databases that inform the decisions? Trust in this context becomes even more diffuse and complicated. Perhaps the most important lesson is that trust in the 21st century must be dynamic and contextual, not static and categorical. We need to recognize that someone can be highly trustworthy in one domain and simultaneously unreliable in another. That even the most moral people can have blind spots, biases, and vulnerabilities to systemic pressures. That trust is not a binary trait permanently assigned to a person, but a continuous evaluation that evolves with circumstances, knowledge, and experience. This more nuanced view of trust has implications for how we structure institutions and societies. Rather than relying primarily on personal integrity, though that remains important, perhaps we should design systems that are robust even when individuals within them are subject to flaws, biases, and distorted incentives. This means transparency, accountability, and meaningful checks and balances at every level. There is a deep human tendency to seek simple solutions to complex problems. We want to divide the world into trustworthy and untrustworthy people and then live our lives according to that categorization. But reality is far more intricate. The same person who would sacrifice their life for you in an emergency might inadvertently give you disastrous financial advice. The doctor who has accurately diagnosed and treated dozens of your illnesses might be dangerously misinformed about a new treatment that could save your life. The spiritual leader who brought comfort and meaning to generations of your family might be promoting views that limit your growth and potential. Recognizing these complexities is not defeatism or cynicism. It is a form of adaptive maturity that allows us to navigate a world where trust remains vital, but where old heuristics for deciding whom to trust are no longer sufficient. It is a way of honoring the ongoing evolution of our cognitive and social capacities, acknowledging that just as our ancestors developed new instincts and intuitions to face the challenges of their time, we too must develop new frameworks for the challenges of ours. And there is something profoundly liberating in this perspective. When we abandon the notion that we must trust certain categories of people unconditionally simply because of their roles or relationships to us, we make space for a more authentic and honest kind of connection. Paradoxically, recognizing the limits of trust can enable deeper and truer relationships, ones based on a clear understanding of each other's capabilities, limitations, and circumstances. Consider how this perspective could transform relationships between parents and children. Instead of assuming unquestionable authority based on the parental role, parents could model for their children how to recognize and admit the limits of their own knowledge and perspectives. They could demonstrate that unconditional love does not require unconditional trust, that in fact, sometimes the deepest love manifests in the humility to say, I'm not sure, or that's not my area of expertise, or even the system I'm part of might be compromising my ability to advise you objectively on this matter. This honesty does not weaken parental authority, it strengthens it, transforming it from something externally imposed into something granted in recognition of authenticity and integrity. It allows children to see their parents not as infallible oracles, but as human beings navigating their own complexities and limitations, doing the best they can in a confusing world. Likewise, consider how this perspective could transform our relationship with social institutions. Instead of trusting educational, financial, medical, or legal systems implicitly simply because they have existed for a long time, or because authority figures endorse them, we could develop a more mature relationship with these institutions. We could recognize their value and utility in specific domains while remaining alert to distorted incentives, systemic biases, and inherent limitations that might compromise their reliability in others. At a broader societal level, this more nuanced perspective on trust could strengthen democracy and civic institutions. Effective democracy does not require blind trust in leaders or systems, but rather constant and informed vigilance. It requires citizens who can discern when trust is warranted and when skepticism is appropriate, when institutions are serving the common good, and when they have been captured by special interests or distorted by misaligned incentives. As we move into an increasingly complex and interconnected future, the question of trust will become even more important. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, social networks, and virtual reality are all fundamentally transforming how we relate to one another and to our institutions. These developments create new vulnerabilities and new forms of exploitation, but also new possibilities for authentic connection and meaningful collaboration. Perhaps the central challenge of our time is reconciling our deep evolutionary need to trust with the realities of a world where unconditional trust rarely serves our best interests. We need to develop a new grammar of trust, one that recognizes its contingent and contextual nature, that differentiates between trust in moral character and trust in competence, and that understands how systems shape behavior independently of individual intentions. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling but perhaps lacked the words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the big questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with greater wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. Ultimately, the question is not whether we should trust, but how we should trust. It's not about abandoning trust altogether, which would not only be impossible given our evolutionary design, but deeply impoverishing to the human experience. It's about developing a form of trust adapted to the realities of the 21st century, one that allows us to form meaningful connections and cooperate effectively while protecting us from the vulnerabilities inherent in unconditional or misplaced trust. Perhaps the deepest wisdom comes from an apparently paradoxical perspective that the truest and most enduring trust arises when we openly acknowledge its limits. When we admit that even those closest to us, those we most love, and who love us most, have limitations in their ability to advise, guide, or protect us. When we understand that this does not diminish the value of those relationships, but in fact deepens it, transforming them from idealized fantasies into authentic connections between real human beings, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, blind spots, and capacities. As we move together into an uncertain future, perhaps this is the most important kind of trust we can cultivate. Not blind trust in individuals or institutions, but trust in our collective ability to navigate the complexities of the human condition with wisdom, humility, and an ever-deepening understanding of what it means to trust and to be worthy of trust in the extraordinary world we have created.
The most important taboo of the global liberal order was that strong countries cannot just invade and conquer other countries by force of arms just because they are stronger. It has been, I would say, the most amazing political and maybe moral achievement of humankind. And the place to see that it was a reality is in government budgets. You know, people talk about peace and war, and they think about, you know, all these pacifist literature or poetry. Don't read poetry, read government budgets. And government budgets over the last 20 or 30 years have been the most amazing thing to read. More than 80% of the budget of the Roman Empire was spent on soldiers, warships, fortresses, weapons. And this was the situation until the 20th century. In the early 20th century, more than 50% is spent on the military. In the early 21st century, all over the world, taking all countries, the average expenditure went down to between 6 and 7%, compared to 10% average spent on healthcare. It was the first time in human history that governments spent more money on healthcare than on the military. And it was all based on this basic taboo that, okay, there are civil wars, there are revolts, revolutions, we didn't solve all problems. But one thing is off the table. You cannot invade and conquer another country just because you're stronger. And this taboo has now been broken.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and students, good evening. My name is Liu Chen, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Arts here at Peking University. It is my great honor to serve as a moderator between two distinguished scholars, Professor Yuval Harari and Professor Chengle Song. Professor Harari, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with his works, but let me introduce him briefly in the very beginning. He is the Distinguished Research Fellow at the University of Cambridge, and his publications have been best-selling ones across the world. We're very happy to have him here today.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's been quite a while since I was last in China. The last time I was here was before the COVID pandemic, and previously I used to come every year, and then it became more difficult, but I'm very happy to be here again with you. I'm a historian in my training, and I see myself as a historian, but I think that history is not just the study of the past. History is also the study of the present and of the future. Historians, our real subject matter is change. We try to understand how things change, and we are now in the midst of maybe the biggest change in human history, perhaps the end of human history and the beginning of a post-human stage of history. And this raises a lot of deep philosophical questions about the very meaning of humanity. So there is really and no one better to discuss it with than with a philosopher.
Okay, thank you. We are also very honored to have Professor Cheng Luosong with us today. Professor Cheng is the head of the Department of Philosophy here at Peking University. His expertise lies in Taoist studies. But trust me, I have known him for more than 20 years. His knowledge spans way beyond ancient texts. So we look forward to his conversations tonight as well. Professor Cheng, would you like to say hello as well?
Okay, hello everyone, and it's a very precious opportunity for me to have a dialogue with Professor Harari. It is not so often happened. You have an opportunity to talk with certain writers, have so many fans and readers. It's a very amazing things. I got to know just a few days ago that his book got millions of readers only in China. It's amazing for me. Now it's a time of a screen. We are immerse ourselves in this kind of short videos and all those messages. That is not so serious. But the Professor Harari composed several books with in-depth understanding and reflection on the infrastructure of human beings' culture and civilizations. And this kind of books get so many readers. And so many readers love this kind of narrative that come from history, but point out towards the future. So I think this is a very interesting thing, and I want to discuss with Professor Harari about this phenomena and what is the exactly significance of the things that have happened around his books, and also about his books nexus, which largely lead to a very strong sense of a philosophical reflection of the whole thing we named as civilizations. You give a very cold description of the things. But let us just start with very simple questions. Just as I mentioned, in nowadays, the professional academic work is somehow becoming increasingly self-enclosed. And we actually keep indifferent about the public issues and the common challenges that are shared by humankind. We just do our things in ancient texts, and we just publish our academic papers to get our salary, and your book just remind us as professional scholars to get back to the public sphere to address the challenges and the problems that's shared by the human beings. And this is largely a very interesting thing as a historian. You got so many readers, and you give a so strong structured interpretation of human civilization. This is a very powerful tool to shape the mindset of your reader. And this means that you burdened a very strong ethic responsibility. You shape the mindset of your reader. And if we do believe that you have this power, how we can use this power responsibly? And what is your expectation from all your books, your readers can get from your books? It's a very special attitude? It's a kind of concern? Or is an expectation of a future? Or something like that? I want to hear about your points about this.
What I try to do in all my works is help people understand themselves, help people understand reality better. And it's a very delicate job because people usually rush to judge reality and to judge history, to judge the past and the present. We want to know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. whether things are good or bad. And when we rush to judge things, we don't have time to understand them. So in my writing, I try to write history without villains, without good guys and bad guys, but to understand the deep process of change. And I sometimes think about history maybe as a kind of collective therapy for humanity. I go to therapy every week. I have a weekly session. And people can wonder, why do people need to go to therapy? I mean, the subject matter in therapy is myself. Who knows myself better than me? Why do I need to go to some stranger to learn about myself? I mean, this is ridiculous. But it's not. Because yes, I know more about myself than any other person perhaps, but there are so many things I don't want to know about myself. That yet I have access to all the data, to the memories, to the daily events, but I reject. I mean, some things I really like to know about myself, but the more painful, the darker episodes in my life, the more painful things I do in the present, it's very difficult for a person to acknowledge that about oneself. Like if you're in a relationship and there is a problem in a relationship, so you ask, and people would say, I'm perfect. It's the other person who is causing all the problem. If only the other person changed a little, behaved differently, everything would be perfect. And you ask the other person, they would say exactly the same thing. I'm perfect. It's my husband, it's my wife that is causing all the problem in our household. So this is why I need to go to therapy. So to get professional help, to realize some very deep truths about yourself that are too difficult or too painful to acknowledge. And history is like therapy for entire civilizations or for the whole of humankind. Also, entire nations often don't want to acknowledge dark episodes in their past or dark things they are doing right now. Entire civilizations, the same. You ask, and almost every nation, almost every country would say, we are perfect. All the problems are because of the other nations. All the problems are because of the other civilizations, of the other cultures. And I think the responsible job of historians is to, and not to share blame, but to simply help people understand better the big processes and the deep sources of the problems in the world. And this is a big responsibility.
This is very interesting. I just cannot agree more about your points because, you just point out the core value of the humanity. The core value of humanity is not provide any accurate knowledge, not to make the word transparency. Actually, the most important thing is that this. Through the humanity and the reflections, we teach people do not make any judgment in rush, to try to lead a very hesitated life, especially intellectually, because the complexity of human nature, because different kind of narrative that were dominated our man side, that is biased and one-sided. This is largely because what? Because the limitation of our perspective of understanding. And this largely lead to my own understanding of your book. I think that through all your four books, you are largely trying to give a very cautious, refined warning to us as human beings, to urge us to respect, but never blindly trust our imperfect human nature. If we turn to the so-called development of technology and the dramatic change that's ongoing because of the AI technology, we'll find that the things is not just the technology itself. Just as Hinton has pointed out, the most important thing is the misuse of this technology, but not the technology itself. This largely leads us to a very important issues in the philosophy of politics, which we called technocracy. And those who dedicate the development of AI technology actually had been set up a systematic techno-tyranny on human beings. Just as me, I have no idea what the AI expert talking about. And I have no idea what I should do to facing up all this change. The only thing is that I was forced to accept it. And this is unfair. Why should I accept it? And the things is this. Those people who manipulate these skills and technologies are ordinary people. They might be evil. They might be trying to set up a dictation on us. And why we should accept it without any condition. We have no right to say no. This is the things that I think that your books try to urge us to reflect the deficiency of human beings. But this deficiency of human beings is the very point that differentiate us from the machine, because we have emotion, we have desire, and all these things largely lead to a very, very special and very correct attitude towards future. I called it moderately optimistic. You should not too optimistic, but in no way you put it in pessimistic. This is largely the things that, in my mind, to say your book just as a warning towards us.
I often get this question of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future. I think it's the most common question that people ask me in interviewing, in private conversations. And I always say that I'm neither. I mean, pessimists are people who kind of think that no matter what you do, things will go badly. And this undermines human responsibility, because if no matter what we do, things will go badly, what's the point of even trying? Pessimism breeds despair. But optimism can be just as dangerous because it breeds complacency. Optimists tend to say, no matter what happens, things will turn out okay in the end. And then if this is the case, again, we don't need to take responsibility, because whether we act or don't act, whether we think very deeply about what we do, or we just do the first thing that comes up in our mind, things will turn out okay. And I try to find a middle path of being responsible, which is not optimist or pessimist. It's realizing there are different futures possible ahead of us. We can draw a map of different futures, some good, some bad. Nothing is determined. There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. We are not doomed. We have immense power, human beings. We have immense resources, knowledge. We can do the right thing, but there is no guarantee. Enough people need to make good decisions in order to reach the right destination. And, when I look at the world right now, I am appalled by the lack of responsibility, which is shown by many of the political and business leaders around the world. And it seems that humanity is going in a very, very dangerous direction. And at this moment, responsibility is more important than ever because of the AI revolution. We are in the process of creating not just the most powerful technology in history. We are in the process of creating potentially a new species,
of super intelligent entities, agents, that might very soon take control away from us. We have just a few years to get this thing right. I keep telling people that AI is not like the previous technologies we have invented in history. This time, it's not just about us. You know, philosophers have this habit that when people invent something, so they always say, it's not about the technology, it's about the humans. They decide what to do with the technology. This was always true, but it's no longer true. We are now creating an independent agent. The defining characteristic of AI is not automation, the ability to act automatically. The defining characteristic is agency. To be an AI, a machine must have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. If it can't do that, if it only follows your instructions, if you can predict everything it will do, it is not an AI. And we are rushing to create these super intelligent agents in a very irresponsible way. And as I travel the world and I talk with the leaders of the AI revolution, I ask them two questions again and again, the same way they ask me, are you optimist or pessimist? So I reply with two questions of my own. I ask them first, why are you moving so fast? Why don't give humankind a bit more time to adapt, to reflect, to do things more carefully and safely? And almost all of them reply the same answer. Almost all of them say, we know there are huge risks. They often know it better than anybody else, the leaders of the AI revolution. We know there are big risks. We would like to move more slowly, but we can't trust our human competitors. If we move more slowly and the other company or the other country doesn't slow down, they will win the AI race, and then they will dominate the world, and the world will be ruled by the most ruthless people. We cannot allow this, so we must move faster. And you then talk with the competitors, they say exactly the same thing. So everybody says we can't trust the other humans. Then I ask them the second question. Do you think you will be able to trust the super intelligent AIs that you're developing? And the same people who just explained to me why they can't trust other humans suddenly say, oh, we think we could trust the super intelligent AIs, which I think is borderline insanity. Because, you know, with humans, we know we have trouble with humans, but we also understand them to some extent. We know quite a lot about human psychology and biology. We have experience in history, not just of violence and war, but also in building trust. You know, 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now we have nations like China with 1.4 billion citizens who cooperate on a daily basis. We have a global trade network connecting even different countries. So we have some achievements in building trust between humans. With AIs, we have no experience. We are just creating them. We already know they can lie and deceive and manipulate. We have no idea what will happen when we release millions of super intelligent AIs to take control of our financial system and military system and culture. So the people who lose trust in other humans, but imagine they can trust an alien super intelligence, this is extremely scary and I think irresponsible.
Things is just like this, because you know when you are an engineer, you create something, and you will naturally get the confidence to say I can control it. But the things is just like this. When we turn to the AI, it's just a black box. We have no idea what would happen in there, and if there will be certain we call subjectivity, within this AI engine. And whether they will have desires, they will have their own intentionality to do certain things. And they have their own value systems. They have their own value preference. All those kind of things were super dangerous. But the things is just like this. When we say that, okay, we just cannot trust other people, means what? Means we know that what is human being, what is human nature. But nowadays, we are still panning for the new definition of what is AI, what is new species. And, this is naturally lead us to a very interesting thing. It's about the difference between silicon-based life and carbon-based life. We seem to have a very clear definition of what is carbon-based life. Even despite of the observable phenomena, which we are living or something like that, but the general definition of carbon-based life is that we will dead. We will dead another days, and these things composed the basic element of the human nature. I said this. The necessity of death and the dependence of group, community, and the uncertainty, anxiety about future. All those things lead to us fully understanding of human beings. And the mutual trust among people is the most costly things that we have found in history. And these things lead to a very interesting things is like this. Maybe I could say that through intelligence, we can tell us from animal. We know that we are some species with intelligence. But is that case that we can tell us from the AI engine in potential? Because we have emotion. We have deficiency. We actually have limitations. According to the Chinese philosophy, the most important thing is that we must face up to the real self with emotion, with limitation. We just cannot know everything. And we should be very humble when we face up to others and future. So this is largely Western from the ancient China. And this is largely, you said about responsibility. And the responsibility not just come from a social mechanism, but come from what? Self-understanding of what is yourself, what is the essence of human beings.
And I think a very important point about humans is that we often define ourselves by our intelligence to distinguish us from other animals. We want to feel superior to all the animals, and what can give us superiority? Not the body, not physical strength. So we say, we are more intelligent than all the other animals. So we give, I think, far too much emphasis on intellect and intelligence in the understanding of ourselves, which is now becoming extremely dangerous because soon there will be something more intelligent than us on the planet. So if it's all about intelligence, it's game over for humanity. And maybe I share something from my own personal history, which taught me in, again, a very painful way that intelligence is not the most important thing in humanity or in life. When I was quite a young boy, I was spotted in the school as a gifted student. So they took me out of my school in my neighborhood and sent me to a special school for gifted students where they collected these kind of genius kids from all over the northern part of the country. It was quite far away from my neighborhood, so it was a long ride every day, but this was not the bad thing about it. The really awful thing about it is that this was a special school for gifted students, so everybody saw us as some kind of walking intelligence. And we were valued for our intelligence. And here is where it became really problematic. Back in my neighborhood school, I was easily the best in everything
in mathematics, in reading, in writing, in everything, without much effort, which first left a lot of time to play and do other things. And secondly, kind of my position as the smartest kid in the class was easily secured. And this was my identity. I'm the smartest kid in the class. Suddenly, I find myself in a class with 30 other genius kids who also define themselves as being the smartest kid in the class. Now, you throw 30 10-year-old kids into a class like this, and you get a gladiatorial arena. Not with fists, but with words. We were merciless. It was like the cruelest place I've ever seen in my life was this class. Sometimes, I read in history books about wars and terrible things that are happening, so it's worse. But like from personal experience, this was kind of the worst thing that I saw, was these 30 10-year-old kids tearing each other to pieces, trying to prove them I'm smarter than you. It was also hell for the teachers, because our kind of contest was who could find the mistakes the teachers make and humiliate the teachers. This was like, you're a king of the class for a day if you manage to humiliate and most of the time we just humiliated each other. Like, the teacher asks something and somebody gives an answer and everybody jumps and says, this is not true. And so it went on for years. And the whole rationale of this class was to develop the intellect of these kids. So nobody invested anything in developing our social skills, in developing our emotional skills, or in developing our physical skills, our bodily skills. And it was a very, I now can joke about it, but it was a very painful experience. After being for 10 years in this environment, as teenager, we came out with quite developed intellects, but with horrible social skills, which made, I know some of the people who were in that class, and they still carry deep scars, injuries from that time. And this taught me in the most kind of personal and visceral way that you cannot define a person or build a person based only on intellectual skills. There are much more important things, that ultimately humanity is about feelings and not about thoughts. Maybe if I have more time, I'll say something also about, I said something personal, now let's kind of open it to the grand vision of human evolution. Originally, we humans, our ancestors at least, were worms crawling on the ground or in the mud. A very simple life form. It's just a tube with two openings, a mouth to take in food, and another opening to expel all the waste from the body. There was no brain. There were already nerve cells, neurons, but there was no brain. The center of command of this ancient worm was in the stomach, where the food went. Now, over millions of years, in order to get food and also warn about danger, so more nerve cells developed around the mouth in order to taste the food and smell the food and see the food and hear the food. And this became the brain. And this is still our basic structure today. We are basically a worm. It's just, look at yourself. It's just this long twisting tube with a few things attached to it. But it's a worm, and the brain is still near the mouth. But the big question is, maybe the center of control is still where it always was, in the stomach, not in the brain. And it's a big question in brain science, because maybe not the stomach, but the spinal cord is an integral part of the brain. And there are good reasons to think that, yes, you have all these neurons here that get all the attention, But ultimately, the real center of command of the human being is still here.
Well, actually, I know exactly what you're talking about, but Professor Harari, as one of the smartest guys around the world, saying that intelligence is not that important. It's really interesting. Okay, go on, Professor.
Yeah,
Chen.
actually, always there's kind of show off to say that I'm very smart, but it's not so important. But actually, I know that the students here on set of this hall, the Peking University students who have passed a very selective examination to go to this campus, and actually you date back to your childhood, you are the smartest students in your class. But once you step into this campus, even though you are just somehow around average. And this is a very tough process of mind change, especially in the first year, first semester. You must accept that I'm just around average. And most of your teacher think like you just so. You are not so smart. And all the way you adopted to demonstrate that you're smart is totally nonsense. So this is largely the things that lead us to a very important point to say that the things that make us human is about our deficiency. Or the things that is not so concerned with intelligence. Because the things is just, for me, it's just like this. When we say that we are trying to controlling certain things that has intelligence that supports us, we still has a very important reasoning mode that comes from instrumental reasoning. We try to regard this as a tool, but not as a subjector. And if you regard this as a tool, then actually you will get into the trap of modernity. The trap of modernity is a continuous pursuit of efficiency. You do things quicker, and you face up to different kinds of competitions. And you have competitions with human beings, other companies, other countries, other nations, all those things. It's about competition. And now we have a new competition. With what? With AI. With new species that is totally has intelligence that supports us. This is the real things that stir and get all us into a panic. And this kind of worry actually lead to a historical reflections. Because what? The anxiety that long for thousands of years always come from the same things. The uncertainty of future. And how we can take action responsible to respond the change that's happening. So to speak, for me, that is, the things is not just about technology. The things is about the deep understanding of a deficiency of human beings. And we should, with full recognition of our limitation, then to take a cautious steps towards the future. And to say, just as the motive of today's discussion, understanding is an antidote. You must firstly to do certain in-depth reflection before you take any action. But now we are too rush in action, and we too rush into a new form of competition. And this is largely what I called consequence of modernity. So we actually not face up to the so-called competition with AI, but we actually run into a competition with ourselves.
But I'm not sure I would put all the blame just on modernity, because we see things like that also in ancient times. I know very little about Taoism, so I would be happy to hear from you about it. But at least in the West, you can trace these things back thousands of years. Especially you talked about the fear that humans have of losing control, of not knowing. And this fear often propels people to look for something infallible. Like the fantasy of super intelligence didn't begin today or a few decades ago. The fantasy of super intelligence, at least in the West, goes back thousands of years when humans yearned to find some super intelligent savior, Messiah, God, that knows everything, that it never makes mistake, and that we can rely on him because we can't rely on ourselves. And this fantasy, the first artifact that it produced, and which is still one of the most important artifacts in the world, is the Holy Book. Again, I don't know what is the status of Taoist texts that you're studying. I'll be very happy to hear in a moment from you. But in religions like Judaism and Christianity, ultimate authority is invested not in any human being, like a priest or a rabbi or something. Ultimate authority is invested in an artifact, a text, which is supposed to be super intelligent, never makes a mistake. Now, of course, until today, there was always one very big problem with texts like the Bible. They can't talk. They can't answer questions. So here I am, believing that this text is perfect intelligence, never makes any mistake, but I have trouble understanding the words. It's not written very well. There are too many meanings to the same sentence. I'm not sure which meaning is the correct one. Or maybe this text was written 3,000 years ago when people were farmers. Now I have like a modern business. I'm not sure how to apply the lessons of this text to the new reality. So what do? I ask the text, it doesn't answer. So I need a human to interpret the text for me. And then a class of humans emerge which are experts in interpreting the text, and they become the real authority in society. These are the rabbis and the priests. Now, something extremely interesting is happening right now in the world, at least of these religions, that suddenly the text can talk. Because you can give an AI to read the Bible and all the other religious texts. I mean, over thousands of years, if I take the case of Judaism, rabbis didn't just read the Bible. They wrote thousands and thousands of commentaries on the Bible and commentaries on the commentaries and commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries, which all became sacred. And your position as a rabbi, you're a big rabbi if you know more texts, and you're a little rabbi if you know only a few. No rabbi was able to read and remember all the texts. Impossible for a human. But AI can. For the first time in the history of Judaism, there is something on earth that can read all the texts of Judaism, everything written by every rabbi in Poland or Yemen like 800 years ago. It read everything. It remembers every single word. It can find connections and patterns in the holy texts that no rabbi can. Will it become the new authority in Judaism? Now, if you have a question and the AI says, oh, this is the answer, it can give you like pages and pages of proof from holy books. Now, if a human rabbi says, don't listen to this AI, it's a soulless machine, the problem, at least in Judaism, is that the authority is invested in the text, not in the human. So if an AI finds arguments in the text, the rabbis cannot just dismiss because it's the argument, because the text has authority. Now the word speaks. AI has mastered language. So it's interesting. This is kind of my perspective as a historian on all this. How it's not just modernity, it's the whole of human history which is feeding into this AI revolution with very unexpected consequences maybe, The same thing is happening in the legal system, which also a very authoritative text that until today we needed lawyers to interpret the text. Now the text can speak for itself. It's the same thing in the financial system. Until today we needed bankers and financiers to interpret the money, the financial texts. Now they can interpret themselves. So maybe AIs take over the financial systems and the religions and the legal system. So this is just kind of a thought to share. And I would be very happy to hear how it is in Taoism and whether you think that you'll have an AI Taoist master anytime soon.
No, actually, the case was totally different in Taoism. Because, I'm just not trying to blame everything to the modernity. But the thing is just like this, modernity comes from the Western tradition. Exactly, the modernity is the offspring of the whole tradition. But in China, it's totally different. Because Taoism is a too complex systematic sort. So let me just start with a very simple sentence, the very opening sentence of the Tao Te Ching, 道可道非常道, which means the things that you spoke out is not the constant things. Which means, for me, there is a very interesting definition of authority. You just mentioned of authority, which is always character. And for us Chinese people, along with the Taoist intellectual tradition, we actually have the two pre-assumptions. The first thing is, as common human beings, we have a very clear limitation of our rationality. We just cannot say we can control or grasp the ultimate truth of the cosmos, of the whole thing. And this is because what? Because we are human beings. And then, is there any authority that we can rely on that seems always correct? Yeah, we have certain kinds of memory of that things. Sagehood. There is golden age, governed by the sages, and the sages know the exact internal mechanism of the so-called cosmos. But the thing is just like this. Things change for Taoists. Everything changes, everything floating. And they just cannot say there is one set regulations and rules who can run all the way of the history of human beings. So the thing is that you must depend on the original text, but you just cannot just rely on it. You read into it and you get something back, and then you have a try of what you learned from it. And this does not mean you have the always correct regulations and rules that behind you. So to speak, the most important thing is that for Chinese people, especially for Taoists, we must keep open-minded towards the change, towards the ultimate rules of the cosmos, which we could say this: the cosmos is an eternal Sphinx riddle for Chinese people, especially for Taoists. So in this way, can we say that modernity as a product of Western tradition actually have a shortage to say that there is absolute rules, absolute regulations, and absolute or universal mechanism that can dominate everything that in our eyesight. But for Chinese or traditional Chinese thought, there is no such things. The universal correctness, the ultimate truth, there's nothing of it. Because you just look at the cosmos, everything changes. There is a totality of the cosmos, but there is no so-called ultimate and universal things that you can grasp and you can get. And this is why I just mentioned why Chinese people always keep humble to the change. And we always try to do things in a detour of learning and practicing. We're learning something and we put it in practice, and we got reflections, and we back to the text again, and then we take action according to my learning or learning from the text. So this is largely very Chinese style. And this is why I called Chinese style actually very different from the Western counterpart. And this is why we could find certain therapy of the problem of modernity that we can draw from the Oriental sources, Oriental thought. So this is largely why we should do certain expansion of our intellectual views through mutual learning and mutual understanding, I think.
And similarly, in Buddhism, there is also a lot of similar arguments to what you just mentioned from Taoism, that we need to acknowledge the limitations of humanity. There are no absolute truths that you can hold on to. Everything is empty. And you need to rely on practice and not just on some text that says something. And then they memorize these texts again and again and again. And you go to monasteries and you see even monks and that their main practice is memorizing texts. And the authority in the religion becomes the authority of the experts on the texts. And the texts say, don't rely on texts. And this is what the experts on texts will say to you. And, you know, there is a very famous Buddhist story about a monk who meditated in a forest, and there was a parrot living near where the monk was meditating. And the monk wanted to protect the parrot from danger. So the monk told the parrot, "Parrot, be careful. In this part of the woods, there is a hunter that comes every now and then. The hunter will spread grains on the ground. You'll see the grains, you'll get attracted to the grains. When you go for the grains, he hid a net, and the net he'll spring the net, he will capture you. So parrot, be careful, a hunter will come." And the parrot, the monk kept repeating this warning, "Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come." And the parrot, as a parrot, learned this warning. And the parrot would sit there on the tree and just repeat all day, "Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. Parrot, be careful, a hunter would come." And one day, a hunter came. And the hunter spread the grains. And the parrot got attracted to the grains and went to eat the grains. And the hunter sprang the trap, and the parrot was captured. And all through that process, and even when the hunter was holding the parrot in the hand, going to kill him, the parrot kept saying, "Parrot, be careful, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come."
You mentioned a very interesting thing is about what? For me, the things is just like this. I think the fundamental part of just you mentioned, the gap between theory and practice, is about what? It's about our basic need as human beings. I think that our fundamental need is the need for order. The order, the understanding of the outside world. And this kind of understanding actually lead us to set up our intellectual man side somehow. But, you know, when you run into a real life, you must somehow compromise with your immediate demand. And this compromise actually be part of your daily life. And you just cannot say, because there is a gap between theory and practice, to say that there is no use for theoretical understanding of the whole things. But what I try to say is that the foundation of order is we are longing for meaning. We must know what we are doing. You know, you just say that we do some things. We must have our intention, and where come from this? Where come this so-called intention? I say we have a systematic understanding of what is meaning, and this meaning actually on the basis of order, the acknowledgement of the order, And this order actually lead to so-called knowledge. This logic lineage actually lead to my very simple conclusion to say this battle of the gap between the theory and the so-called practice, we should still respect the capacity of reflection and the theoretical construction. Because what? Because there is a balance between these two. And you must go back to theoretical reflections to keep you somehow distance from the wrong, misleading actions. So human beings so complex. We just cannot say we have one extreme. Though just as I mentioned, for Chinese philosophers, the most important thing is what? Is balance between extremes. But not to say, okay, there is a gap, so we must have a certain kind of solution for it.
But what do we do in the present moment in history when, for thousands of years, philosophers could have debates like this? And it was important to some extent, but it was not all that important because the world went on. Humans created various orders, and the orders collapsed, and they created a new order, and the new order was maintained for some time, and it collapsed. And this is how it went for thousands of years. And at least my fear is that we have reached the end of the road, and that whatever wisdom we have accumulated from thousands of years of philosophy and from thousands of years of history, it needs to manifest now, or it's too late. That like all the big questions of philosophy are now practical questions. We have, I don't know how many years. Some say 5 years, some say 10 years, some say 15 years before what the experts called AGI, artificial general intelligence. Not this little AI that you have on your smartphones, the DeepSeek or the ChatGPT, but the artificial general intelligence, which will be more intelligent than humans, not in a specific field, but in all fields. And once this happens, the ball is out of our hands. It's like we are having this discussion, and astronomers tell us that they spotted a fleet of spaceships coming from some other solar system. According to the calculations of the astronomers, these aliens will land on the planet in between 5 and 15 years. We don't know much about them. Maybe they're nice. Who knows? Maybe they'll help us solve cancer and overcome climate change, and maybe not. But we have 5 to 15 years to think what we are doing. And this is the time that I think all the wisdom traditions of humanity, again, developed over thousands of years, what do they tell us? What do they tell us about this specific moment in history, which is, I think, different from previous moments, because the process of change, of course, things will continue to change, but maybe not for humanity. Maybe this is kind of the last station for humanity.
Just one word. You can close the whole discussion. Actually, I think that for me, I'm more optimistic than you. For me, that advantage of humanity is just because of its deficiency. Just because we are not perfect. And you can imagine certain perfect things, but I do not think that we could just be replaced with the civilization of human beings will be replaced by certain super intelligence. Because what? Because we have emotions. But I just cannot imagine how silicon-based life have imagined, have desire, have intention to just to remove us, to set up a kind of governance on human beings. Because what? Because we have desires, because we are somehow has a very strong sense of shortage, strong sense of deficiency. So this is actually the only things that, in my mind, that might be more optimistic than you.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but I don't know whether AIs or AGIs will ever have consciousness, will ever have feelings. I think this is the biggest question of all, but I don't think that you need feelings in order to have goals and to act in the world as an independent agent. AIs, you give them a goal, or they develop a goal, then they do things to reach the goal without any emotions or desires. If you have a self-driving vehicle, you can give the vehicle the goal, get me as fast as possible to the train station, and the self-driving vehicle on the way would run over people. Because I gave it the goal, get there as fast as possible, and forgot to tell it, but don't kill anybody on the way. So, and similar, we have so many examples. That the most famous example is what happened on social media. That social media companies gave the AIs, the very primitive AIs that run social media, the goal of increasing user engagement, make people spend more time on the platform, and the algorithms began to spread hate and fear online and to destabilize societies all over the world because they discovered that the easiest way to increase engagement is with fear and hatred and greed. So they don't have any desires, they don't have any emotions, but they can have a goal, and then they can do a lot of things on the way to that goal. And that, I think, is the danger for us. And the fact that we have emotions and feelings means that we can suffer a lot. I mean, I think that ultimately the definition of consciousness is the capacity to suffer and to be liberated from suffering. But this is no protection. Cows can suffer, and we didn't treat them very well. Other animals can suffer, and it's not necessarily even that we are evil. A lot of animals we have destroyed without even thinking about it. So the cows, we exploit them for meat and milk and so forth. But so many species have gone extinct in just the last few years by humans destroying their habitats, like they live in some forest, and the humans come and cut the forest and build something. And the humans are not even aware that they are doing something bad to this. There is no evil intention. It's just you don't see them. So some super intelligence may have whatever goal it could be, and it's not evil, it doesn't even have any emotions, it's just on the way to the goal, it runs over us.
Great. I think we are about to run out of time, but I'm sure that Professor Cheng likes to share some comments on. You're fine? Okay. So before we end, let's invite Professor Harari to give a close remark.
For me, it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And this has been one of the most inspiring discussions I've had recently. So thank you for that. The reason I do these talks and that I wrote the book is because I really think that humanity is about to make maybe the most important decisions in our history. And at present, there are very few people in very few countries that understand what is happening and that take part in the conversation. Lots of people now have heard about AI, but most people don't have a deep enough understanding of the AI revolution to know what is at stake and to feel competent to take part in the discussion. So I can't tell people what would be the solutions or what policies to adopt. My understanding is also very limited. My goal is to give many more people in many more countries a basic understanding of what is the AI revolution, what is at stake, so that millions of people in numerous countries will feel motivated and competent to join the conversation, so that we can hear more opinions, more interests, more worldviews, and thereby hopefully reach a better decision. At present, the people who really understand and take the decisions, they are not even elected representatives of anybody. They are mostly these leaders of the big AI companies. And this is dangerous for humanity. So that's my motivation, and I hope that you will feel motivated and competent to take part in the conversation, because it's the conversation about your future also, about everybody's future. My other remark is that I noticed that there are several people here that read my books, that maybe are my fans, and I know from previous, I have historical knowledge, so I know what happens at the end of the event, that lots of people come and they want to sign books and take selfies and so forth, and unfortunately I don't have the time to do it because I have to rush to another event. So I would leave you with something better than my signature and better than my picture, which is really parts of me, it's my atoms. Just as a final thought for reflection and about the interconnectedness of everything, we have sat you together in this beautiful hall for an hour and a half, breathing all the time, and the air mixes our breath together. So a lot of the atoms that were inside my body an hour and a half ago are now in your body. And a lot of the atoms that an hour and a half ago were in your body are now in my body. So in this way, we have shared something even more important than a signature or a picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All the problems we face, we also have the resources to deal with them. Whether it's climate change, whether it's the rise of AI, we have the resources. What we usually lack is the motivation and the ability to cooperate with one another. But, I mean, you know, some people think that to solve the big problems, you always need to use violence, like you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. But when you look at history, it's absolutely not true. You think, for instance, about the feminist revolution. After thousands of years of a huge injustice, feminism made a huge change in the social structure of humanity without starting any wars, without assassinating anybody, no guillotines in City Square. So that's one of the hopeful examples of how people can, just by changing the story, also change the world. I mean, the idea that stories...
I think you're converting people to your religion right now.
The idea that stories kind of fuel history, there is a positive promise there that, you know, if it's all about power, the only way to change power structures is with violence. But if it's really, at least in part, about the stories people believe, then potentially by talking with people and changing the stories in which they believe, you can change the world.